Hello there. So in this video I'm going to briefly talk you through creating an audio effect rack with various different chains. So you can route any sound you want to a variety of different effects simultaneously and change between them. So I've just got a really basic drum beat here. Okay, so I'm going to use this as the basis for the audio effect rack, or the input to the audio effect rack, sorry. Okay, so if I go to audio effects on the left over here and then find audio effect rack, and it's the default version I want, not one of these presets, this default here. So I'm going to click and drag it in, and an audio effect rack, like most types of racks when you bring them in, if you bring in the default version, it's completely empty, there's nothing in it. Okay, so if we view the chain list by pressing this button here, see it says drop audio effects here. We can right click and create chain, and I'm going to rename that just with Command and R, and I'm going to call that dry, and hopefully that'll become clear why I've done that in a little while. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to add effects to the audio effect rack. So let's just start with one, and one of my favorites is Overdrive, so let's bring Overdrive in. Now I've brought Overdrive in and it's been put on its own chain. I'm going to give it its own name with Command and R again, R for rename, and I'm going to right click on it and give it its own color as well. So we've got two chains now. We've got something called dry with no effect on the chain, and we've got Overdrive with an overdrive effect on the chain. Okay, now let me just run the drum clip and see what it sounds like. Okay, it sounds a little bit louder, which suggests that maybe it's coming through the overdrive there. If I turn the overdrive chain off, we just hear the dry chain. Turn overdrive on, turn the dry chain off. You can hear the overdrive there as well. Tell you what, let's make this overdrive sound a little bit more exaggerated. I'll turn the drive right up. I'm going to turn the dry wet control to 100% because we've got a dry channel here. So once this is activated, I am going to have dry signal coming through, so I can just turn this to wet, and then I'm just going to turn this down a little bit. So in racks, when you look in the chain list, you can think of this as sort of a mini mixer within the rack. So we've got volume controls, we've got pan controls, we've got activators, which are these buttons, and we've got solo controls as well. I can't quite get that in the center. Come on, you can do it. There we go. Right, okay, so let's have a listen again. That's a bit more like it. So that is the overdrive chain completely soloed. We're not hearing the dry chain at all. Let's bring it back in. Okay, so that's the dry with the overdrive. Now then, let's add another effect. Let's have a look here. Maybe something like, how about the flanger? Let's bring that in. Okay. It's a shame it doesn't rename the chains for you automatically. Never mind. Okay, so let's just solo this and have a listen. Quite nice. Okay, already the dry wet control's on 100%, so we don't need to pay any attention to that. You can experiment with these controls at your leisure. The purpose of this video is for the audio effect rack, so I'm not going to go through the controls, but I'll just have that there. Okay, so that's pretty good. All right, now if I take that off solo, I'm just going to back this flanger off a little bit. Okay, so we've got a mixer here, we've got a chain mixer, we've got 3 individual chains. And the thing to remember is that the signal is coming out of here, out of our drum rack. This is where the clip is created and the samples are being triggered. It's coming out here, you've got an audio meter here, which shows you the signal coming out of the drum rack. There it is. And then it goes into these chains in parallel. Yeah. So the signal's going through this chain at the same time as it's going through this chain, at the same time as it's going through this chain. Yeah. So the signal goes through the audio effect rack in parallel. It's not going through the dry chain and then into the overdrive and then into the flanger. The signal flow is parallel signal flow, and you can look that up in the manual if you wish to. Okay, so we can decide how much signal we want to be dry, how loud we want the overdrive to be, and how loud we want the flanger to be. And we'll look at this thing a little bit more in a second. I'm going to add one more effect, and I think this time I'll go with, see if we can do anything with erosion. Oh, by the way, I just want to change this color because I don't want them to be all the same color. This was erosion, wasn't it? Okay, and then let's give that its own color as well, and then we'll solo it and have a listen. It's a bit more like it. Right, okay. So now we've got our 4 effects and we've got a mixer. So I'm going to treat this in terms of the mix. I'm going to treat this the same way that I always would. I'm going to turn off all of these chains which have effects on, and I'm just going to start with the dry. I'm going to bring that up to unity gain, and then I'm going to bring in overdrive, and I'm going to fade this up until I like the sound. Same with flanger. Yeah, like that, and then same with erosion. And actually I'm just going to turn this frequency control up. Yeah, because I want the erosion to be on those higher frequencies. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to look at the panning. So I'm going to keep the dry in the center. I think I'll keep overdrive in the center, and then I'm going to offset flanger and erosion against each other. And you should hear some stereo width start to happen now. There we go. So we've panned flanger to the left and erosion to the right. Okay, so that's the basic setup. And then let's have a look. I'll tell you what, I'm going to minimize this so we can see this a little bit better. I'm going to press this chain control. Now then, this enables us to control the flow of the signal in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to select this top chain. I'm going to hold shift and select this bottom chain, and then move the cursor until this bracket appears, and then click and drag this all the way out. Then I'm going to right click and select distribute ranges equally. Okay, so now you've got a visual representation of how the signal is going to be fed into these individual chains. And I could say a lot more about it, or I could just show you it, because once I show you it, it'll make perfect sense. So this is known as the chain selector. I'm clicking and moving this with my mouse. So watch and listen. Okay, so as we move the chain selector, that decides where the signal goes in terms of how it flows through the chains. So if it's in this position, it only, well, whatever position it is, it only flows into the chains which are represented by these bars beneath. You can also overlap these chains like so. And then if we move the cursor until, see the little light blue line, the very narrow light blue line above the darker blue line, if we move that like so, you can make, oops, didn't want to do that. You can make these crossfade into each other. So you can either have a stepped transfer from one area to the other, or you can have a gradual one. Okay, so that's the basics of audio effects racks. If you put together an audio effect rack like that, and you work with the chain list and the chain mixer and this chain selector control, that gives you a really good basis to learn how to work with instrument racks as well. So have a look at the task and give that a go.